In front of me is a Talaria MX5, and we have already done a ton of upgrades to this bike as it sits, starting out with the 1619 wheels that we put on it with Dunlop MX34 tires, moving into all of the basics like your handlebars. We did Warp 9 handlebars, direct mount stem, stem lock, foot pegs. Then we got into suspension on this machine, which is the new Formula Tech front fork. The kit for that fork will be available very soon, and the Formula Tech rear shock to match up the set. And then, like always with all of the other bike builds we do, we then moved into power, starting out with the EBMX X9000 controller and doing a NAB battery on this bike. That not only made this bike come to life, but it also gave us a ton of range out of this machine. But now it's time to supercharge it by putting the EBMX XTA-60 motor onto this machine. Today, I'm going to show you guys how to get that installed and set up so that you can do this to your bike as well. I'm not going to be riding in today's video. We'll save that for another one because this bike deserves all the seat time you can get. So let's dive into a step-by-step tutorial on installing this motor. So let's go over everything that comes in the package with the motor itself. When you purchase it, it's going to come with motor mounting hardware. It's going to come with the gearbox mounting hardware to attach the motor to the gearbox itself. And then it comes with a mounting bracket to go to the gearbox of a Talaria MX4. This is not the correct one for the MX5, so you will need to purchase an additional kit that is available on our website for the MX5. And that kit is going to come with a battery tray and the adapter to put the motor onto the MX5 gearbox. We're ready to get working on the bike, so let's go ahead and remove the battery cover here. Just pull that totally off. My battery's already disconnected. I'm just gonna pull this out of the bike, get it out of the way. Now to try and make life a little bit easier, I'm gonna go ahead and just flip this bike over onto its head. So now let's go ahead and remove the skid plate. These are 4mm Allens with 10mm wrench on the back side. And then 2 on each side. And you can just pull the skid plate right off. Then I'm going to loosen the controller off the bike, also using a 4mm Allen. 2 bolts on each side. Now the controller is ready to just be kind of setting separate. I'm going to remove this plastic cover on the side here. Before I get any further on the motor, let's go ahead and pop the chain off the bike. If you don't have chain link pliers, I highly recommend getting them. They make life so much easier. Now the stock chain on a Talaria MX5 is an O-ring chain, so you just want to make sure that you do not lose those O-rings. And we'll go ahead and pull this chain all the way out of the bike. Now we can go ahead and unplug the motor from the wiring harness here. Open up this loom, pull those connectors apart. Just go ahead and get this all out of the way. Then we'll disconnect our phase wires from the controller that go directly into the motor. Then we can gently set that controller out of the way. Now we can remove the motor mount bolts. There's one here, one there, and 2 directly across on the other side. Using a 6mm Allen, just Just go ahead and loosen these off. Pull that bolt out, pull the sleeve off. Same thing on the lower. Now keep in mind that this brake cable is going to go underneath that sleeve. So it's going to sit right below the battery tray, but right underneath that sleeve. Alright, now on the other side of the bike we can remove the motor mounts over here. These ones are 5mm Allens, not 6mm Allens like the other side. And all of these motor mount bolts are in there pretty stiff. I recommend doing it by hand, just so you don't damage any of the threads on these bolts. If you need to use a little heat, you can. They are Loctited in with red Loctite. Now there's one bolt left to go to get that motor released, but before I do that, I want to get this oil hose out of the way. There is a mount here and a mount up above that. Using a 4mm Allen, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to just pull those mounts off so that hose can move freely for when I go ahead and pull this motor out of the bike. And now your hose should be dangling freely, so we can go ahead and get the motor out of the bike. All right, so now I'm gonna pull the bolt out of the gearbox. It goes all the way through it using a 15mm socket. And then on the other side, I'm gonna grab the bolt head with an 8mm Allen. Then I can go ahead and loosen this off. Now once I pull that bolt through, the motor will be ready to release. All right, I've got the motor and the gearbox up here on the bench now. I'm gonna grab some circlip pliers and let's get this sprocket pulled off of the gearbox. Stick those in, pull that right off, and pull your sprocket out. All right, now that the sprocket's off, I'm gonna take a T40 and pull off these 4 bolts. And flip this motor over. So I recommend taking a photo of your motor, how it sits right now. I'm going to start pulling off these brackets here. This bracket is a 5mm Allen. It's important to keep in mind that these brackets do actually hold the gearbox to the motor itself. So as you undo these last ones, the gearbox will now be free to come off. Alright, so now that all of these bolts with the brackets are off, this is ready to actually come apart. So you simply just lift it straight off there, and we can get this motor out of the way. So now that I've got the gearbox out of the bike, it's also a really good time to do an oil change on this. Super easy to do right now because it's going to be super simple to drain the oil because you can just move it wherever you need to get that out. So I cleaned this up. I am now going to go ahead and do an oil change, and then I will get back to installing this into the bike. Next step on the agenda for the MX5, we are going to remove the lower battery tray here using a 4mm Allen again. Just get that pulled straight on out. Now I'm going to take this battery tray, I'm going to take a small flathead screwdriver and just lift up on these spots to access a couple of the bolts. This is basically just a vinyl covering the bolts there. I'm going to take a 3mm Allen and remove those. And pull that tray off of there. Now I will grab the new bracing and I will take the battery tray itself and set it on. You'll see that it fits when it perfectly slides down into the holes. Right now it's not sliding down into the holes. Right there it slides right in, and all of these 5 bolts are aligned. So I'm going to grab just a tad of Loctite, put it on these bolts. This also came with one additional bolt which we're going to use for the center mount here. Essentially what this does is just create a little bit more space for that new motor to sit into the bike. Now I've got some thread locker on there. Just go ahead and put all 5 of these into the tray. Now we can put the battery tray back into the bike, slide it in place there, put some Loctite on the bolts, and get those back in. We previously pulled all of these brackets off of the motor. These brackets also connect the gearbox to the motor itself, and all of these bolts had some red Loctite on them. So I'm going to take the new gearbox mounting hardware. It's important that you use this new hardware because the threads in the new motor are a different height. So you want to make sure that you use these bolts. I'm going to get these bolts prepped by pulling them out of the bag and putting some red Loctite on them. We'll set those out of the way. Here we are with the new motor. I'm going to take some grease. I'm going to put it into where the shaft goes. Make sure that you grease that up nicely. Just finished up doing an oil change and cleaning up the gearbox. I'm ready to install it now. So let's go ahead and install that right into here. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to reference my photo to be sure that I get all of these mounted up correctly. So something that will be different on this install is the 12-volt DC-to-DC converter. This bracket will no longer fit onto here, so I'm going to remove the bracket from there, but I'm still going to bolt this DC-to-DC converter into the actual motor like it was before. I'm just going to use one mount point instead of the 2 that this one has, but it will hold completely fine. Nothing to be worried about there. So I'm just going to go ahead and set that basically into place right here onto this block, and then put one of our screws down through it. And because of the additional height that you get from this, I'm going to use one of the old screws. I'm going to put some red Loctite back onto that screw and start to work that down in. I'll take my next bracket, put that up in place. Then my final bracket, put that back into place. And utilizing one of the black screws, I will put that up where the other bracket used to sit. I'm going to take a 5mm Allen and just snug all of these bolts. Now the kit that EBMX sent with this motor gives you all sorts of different washers and lock washers as well. Optional on if you want to use them. Every single one of the Talaria gearboxes EBMX has found has got different tolerances, so they basically just said, alright, we'll send a bunch of different spacers in the kit so that no matter the person's bike, we can make something acceptable with washers to make up for the tolerance differences that come from the bike itself. Now that I've got those installed, I'm going to actually torque them down. It is anywhere from 7 to 8 Newton meters to get this torqued properly. Make sure that you have the red Loctite on these bolts. You do not want these to come loose. Alright, so now that all of our brackets are in place and the gearbox is on the motor itself, let's go ahead and flip this over. And now we can install the brace for the gearbox itself. This is where EBMX created a new brace that is going to go onto the gearbox there. I'm going to grab the T40s that previously came off of the old brace and put some red Loctite onto these. These originally had red Loctite on them. Go ahead and tighten all of these down. In the kit there are 2 sleeves, 2 nuts, and 2 through bolts. I'm going to take and put the sleeve in between the motor and the gearbox brace, put that bolt down through, and put the lock nut onto the bottom there. I'm going to take a 5mm Allen and a 10mm open-end wrench and just tighten that down. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side there. Now I want to take my front sprocket and put that back onto the bike. I'm just going to put some grease around this. Take my circlip, stretch that back over, put it into its slot. Make sure that's on there snug. Good to go. Alright, the motor is ready to drop back into place. So I'm going to take that tube, make sure it goes back there, and then try to get things aligned and set back into this machine. Alright, now that I've got the motor back in, I'm going to get it aligned and get that large through bolt to go back into it. I did put a little bit of grease on that bolt itself as well. I'm not going to fully snug this down quite yet, but we'll get it decently tight and in place. Alright, coming over to the side with the logo, I'm going to take the new bolts that came in the EBMX kit. The shorter side, these are the motor mounting hardware bolts. I'm going to line this motor up and install both of these onto the bike. Now it's time for us to come to the other side, and you can see here there is quite the large gap between the motor and the frame in both of the mounting positions. That is where these spacers that came stock on the bike come in handy. There's one long one and one short one. The longer one will go up top here, the shorter one will go down low. Same thing with the bolts. There are new bolts from EBMX for this that you can utilize to go ahead and install this onto your bike. Long bolt goes up here, short bolt goes down there. And you may remember me mentioning earlier that all of these frames come with different tolerances. That is where a lot of these spacers come into handy. So I'm going to put this into here. I'm going to see how many spacers I need to fill the gap. And it looks like I needed about 2. Then I will stick the bolt through the spacers and the sleeve and into the motor. Now that the motor is fully settled in place, I'll go ahead and finish tightening down this bolt that goes through the gearbox. Alright, now we're starting to get into the home stretch, so we can pull up our wiring loom again, attach the connector back to the motor, get that plugged in, take your 12 volt DC-DC converter, plug that back in. The other plug in this loom is a kickstand sensor. I have disconnected that, so that is no longer plugged in. Can put all of this back into this loom and tuck it up under that motor there. Now we can take our phase wires and get ready to put those back into place. These phase wires are direct phase, which means that they come straight out of the motor all the way to this connector. So you kind of want to take and gently massage these wires into the place that you want them to go. So just take your time with this. Don't be overly harsh. This is some great copper that's in here, but you want to make sure that it's really massaged nicely down into place to be able to attach this to the controller and pull it up to the bike itself. And I'm going to take my wires, blue to B, green to G, yellow to Y, get those going back onto this controller here. Get those tightened down. Make sure that I reorient all my wires, including my Bluetooth dongle, back into an appropriate place for it to rest. And then we can move the controller back onto the bike and get that reinstalled. Now that I've got the controller back in place, I can take the motor cover, get that back reinstalled onto those brackets that I put onto the motor itself. Now we can take our skid plate and get that back onto the bike. And this is where you're going to really want to massage these wires down underneath it. So just be gentle while you're moving them. Make sure to push them in a way that they want to flex nicely. Alright guys, motor is back in the bike. I've just got a couple of things left to do. I've got to secure the gear oil hose that I took off earlier that sits back here. I've also got to put the chain back on the bike, put the battery back in, put the battery lid back on, and then we can tune this bike to get it ready to rock. Alright guys, I am ready to dive into tuning this bike now that everything is put back together. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. This bike currently has an EBMX X9000 version 2 on it, which is the old app. The new version 3 has got the new app, which is called the X Series app. So you'll want to do that, but it's a very similar process in that app. You basically want to turn on the bike, find your bike, get it connected. Then I'm going to go over to settings and I'm going to go to general. And this is where I want to choose my motor type. So I'm going to click choose motor type. That is going to have EBMX XTA-60 encoder. Click on that there. Go ahead and click save. And then it's going to ask if I want to calibrate the motor. Yes, I do. Start that calibration. It is now spinning backwards. Let it run through and do its thing. Start spinning forward. And there it goes. It is now successfully calibrated. Go ahead and back out. I'm going to put this up into its mode 1 real quick while it's on the stand. Twist the throttle, see what direction the wheel spins. It is currently spinning backwards, which means I need to go over to general, come down to motor direction. It is currently clockwise. I'm going to click anti-clockwise, click save. That is saved successfully. And now the motor will spin forward and be good to go. Your bike should already be set up as it was previously. There's no reason to change that. You just simply want to get the motor to say Talaria XTA-60 from EBMX and get it calibrated and the bike is ready to rock. Look forward to seeing you guys in the next video where we do actually take this out, we ride it and see how it feels. Super excited for that. EBMX has been working on this motor for a long time, and I'm stoked to get my leg over this bike to test it.